When a nation gives itself over to child sacrifice, especially, and turns a blind eye to it, that God gives them over to his judgment. And until you fix that, you won't fix your problems. When we regulate the when, why, how, and what, we can murder our preborn neighbors. What we're actually claiming, it's very fundamental here, we're claiming that the legislature has the authority to give life and take it away. It has the power of life and death. And now I would argue that it has no constitutional authority to do this, nor any authority delegated by God. Because the state of Idaho has no other authority than what has been delegated by God through the Constitution, by the consent of the people. That's the only authority the state legislature in Idaho has to create laws or to repeal laws. But there's only one justification for saying you shall not murder a human being, and it's that we are created in the image of God. We are different, we're distinct creatures.
We the people of the United States, in order to serve their purpose, establish justice, for ourselves and our posterity.
Well, welcome to Kings Statesmen. We're pleased to have State Senator Brandon Shippy, District 9, is that correct?
District 9, yes.
District 9, from the state of Idaho, the great state of Idaho. Also, I have my formidable co-host, Lennox Kalifungwa. My name is David Shepard. So let's just jump in here. We were talking a little bit before the show, why you decided to run, some of the key issues that got you interested in politics. Could you just give us a brief background on who you are and how you got involved in the world of politics in the state of Idaho?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on here, and thanks for the question. So I was born and raised in Idaho, fourth generation. My family moved out of Oklahoma in the 50s, I believe it was, settled in Weiser, Idaho. They were always apolitical. They were farmers, land levelers, tradesmen in the Weiser, New Plymouth, Fruitland area. And so that's where I grew up, was in the Fruitland, New Plymouth area in southwest Idaho. That's a little bit, about 50 miles west of Boise, Idaho. And so it was completely apolitical most of my life. The Lord did change my heart when I was 25, and the Lord saved me. I became a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, and started developing I guess a biblical worldview. And through that process, especially through the process of the lens of what Scripture commands us to take dominion, to especially in the Old Testament, love to seek the good of the city wherein we dwell, love our neighbors, ourselves. It started becoming more and more convicted. I needed to be involved in the political sphere. Started getting involved in my local Republican Party in 2021, I believe it was, and was really helped by the chairman there. He tried to get me involved, ran for PC, precinct committeeman, I should say, in the local Republican Party, and won that election, started serving, and then was approached by multiple individuals that, hey, you should consider running for higher office. Really didn't think I would, as a business owner, a father, a husband, and so forth. And so really didn't see myself as doing that, but was encouraged to consider it. Went ahead and decided to run for state senate in 23. And
for the 24 election?
For the 24 election, yeah. So I started fundraising in July of 23. Did really well with my fundraising. People were really excited to get behind me. I was a kind of a fresh face on the scene and a conservative voice. And people were just excited to give. They appreciated that I had been my family had been in the area for a long time. The Shippys were well respected, well known, and hardworking, honest businessmen. They had large families, very very conservative folks, but people that you could rely on. And so I think a lot of people were just comfortable with that, and they were kind of looking ahead, looking forward, saying, "Hey, we need some new voices in the state house." And so we were the third highest legislative fundraising races in the state.
That's fantastic.
Of Idaho. I think District 1, both the candidates were the highest, and then I was the third highest in the state of Idaho. And so did really well with fundraising, and then ran a strong campaign I was able to pull off a primary win in May of 24, and then the current senator, that was Abby Lee, for District 9, she decided to take a job in Salem, Oregon, and so she stepped down from her position, left the state, and so then I was appointed by the governor to fill the rest of her term. Became the senator in July of 24 for District 9, and then subsequently won my election in November of 24, which then put me as a second-term senator, which actually has it had some unique implications that, in the providence of God, put me ahead in seniority over even a couple of returning senators who had previously one had lost their election and another had stepped out and now was coming back, and they had served in the House. And then there's a structure of seniority in the Senate that if you've served in the House, if you've served previously in the Senate, you have a level of seniority. But if you're a sitting senator, you have a seniority level even higher. And so because I came in as a sitting senator, in the providence of God, I had a higher level of seniority, which helped with committee assignments. It helped, of course, with your seat on the Senate floor and various aspects of the Senate life. And so as a result, really, so I'm on Senate State Affairs Committee, which is a leadership. Pretty much leadership-only committee. That's where all the big bills in Idaho are to really go through, whether it's election issues, gun issues, abortion issues. So I get to be a voice on that committee. So that was a huge privilege, especially being my first session. And then was also I chose to be on Judiciary and Rules Committee and Health and Welfare Committee. And then I was then appointed by the pro tem to be the vice chairman of Judiciary and Rules Committee. And so that was a unique opportunity to be able to begin to run the meetings and really work with the public, even with public testimony and so forth. But anyway, but as far as some of the issues that I ran on, and some of the things that motivated me, it was. I mean, I would say fundamentally is the issue of life, the issue of the lives of our preborn. That was a huge issue when I ran, and it remains probably the number one issue for me, because as I've said many times, if you don't even have life, you can't even debate other policy. So that's the fundamental one. We look at the founders of our nation and the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident that we have been granted, right, these unalienable rights, among which are, and they list just three, but what was the first one they listed?
Life.
Life. If you don't have life, liberty means nothing.
Right.
If you don't have life and liberty, the pursuit of happiness or blessedness, fullness, as it were, that's the meaning of the term, the old sense of the term. You don't have those, and so if our government is instituted and established for the securing of those rights, you have to start with right number one, the right to life. And so, to me, that's a major issue. But there are also a lot of issues I care about. When it comes to free market driven policies rather than government regulated. I'm obviously see socialism as a poison to society. When you earn something, you deserve all of it. Not to have it stripped away from you by force and redistributed to somebody who put in no effort for it, right? These are really basic things, but at the same time, so often in policy building, it's all driven by emotion and not principle.
So you talked about how your faith brought you to this point of being civically engaged. I think that's fascinating. Charlie Kirk actually used the law as a form of measuring. Or allowing himself to have conversation with other people in which they could see, if the law is a good measuring stick for us, then we are going to quickly realize that the law actually leads us back to Jesus, who is the source of all morality. So if you could, in a brief sense, what were the issues foundational in your faith that you saw as a catalyst for you wanting to get involved in politics?
So as I mentioned, the issue of life was paramount. But when it comes to how do we develop policy, out of, you might would say, out of our moral foundations. You have to have a moral foundation when running any kind of policy. And the question is not whether you do, but which moral foundation that is.
Correct.
And so we see that everybody has these moral underpinnings of how they think and so forth. So when it comes to, how I view policy and how I approach it. For example, private property rights. To me, that's one of the most basic functions of government is to secure the rights of individuals, which is the right to property. And how do we know that we have private property rights? How do we know that it doesn't just belong to the collective general public if I've earned it? And it's really simple. Thou shalt not steal. That commandment assumes that you have a right
something.
to what is yours. And it's really basic. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not commit murder, right? That assumes what? That everyone has a right to life. And we can even go further into that. We see, of course, that we are created in the image of God. The founders of our nation didn't just pull it out of thin air.
Right.
When they said we had unalienable rights. These are not rights that are granted by government. The Constitution does not give you rights. It's meant to secure the rights that you inherently have, you possess as a human being. And so that's the moral foundation, I guess, as you approach, I think, any policy, is asking these questions: is what are the moral foundations for whether it's tax policy, whether it's road policy, any kind of policy, because we deal with so much. Is what are the moral foundations for that? And often they're very simple. They're very basic, but to me, I have to look to the Bible as the ultimate source of that moral foundation.
Right.
And because I can't look to my own heart, I can't just look to my opinions. We can't just look to the collective whole. We have a constitutional republic that is built upon the affirmation of unalienable rights, meaning that even if the society as a whole were to disagree with that and say we can alienate this right and that right, those are unalienable. They were not. They preceded government essentially, and so they're not a creation of the mind. They're not a creation of the opinions and of the elite or whatever it might be.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but was it like you were not a Christian, and then Christ saves you, you become a Christian, you're reading through the Bible, and you're like, wow, the Lord cares about these issues, therefore I should care about these issues. And that is what drove you ultimately into a position of like wanting to run for or wanting to get involved in the local politics scene and then eventually running for a higher office?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll admit when the Lord first saved me, I was very, I would say, a pious Christian. Piety is good, but pious in the sense that you really didn't care about the political or civil sphere and scene. It was more I'm going to be spiritual now, and I have my personal issues I need to work on. But it's more about just my relationship with Jesus,
Sure.
and that was really just the direction of my life. I was, I loved going to church and loved reading my Bible and those type of things. But it was really once I started being taught that, hey, there's a, and I would say that's more of a modern American evangelical view of how we function as Christians in society. And it was really once I started receiving teaching on a more robust teaching on thinking more multi-generational, saying that, hey, we actually have a duty as humanity before God to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, take dominion of it. And then more than that, we have a duty to seek the welfare of the city wherein we dwell. We see as God directed Israel when they went to Babylon, hey, don't just be disengaged. You engage, you actually make a difference. We see one of the most humble, godly men in Scripture in the Old Testament was Daniel. And he served in some of the highest places in government.
Right.
And so I'll have these conversations sometimes with more pacifist Christians, and I grew up a pacifist as well. My family was apolitical. They didn't vote. They just stayed out of the whole scene. And so I think that influenced me early on as well. Just say, hey, that happens all by itself type of thing, rather than saying, hey, there's going to be these decisions are going to happen.
Yeah.
But are they going to happen with good moral principles, or are they just going to happen with random non-principles, just pragmatic statistics or emotional feelings, whatever it might be, which is typically how politics and policy is driven.
Yeah.
And so it was really a development. Once I realized, hey, I need to be getting involved. This is actually important. I have children. I want to have grandchildren. I want to have great-grandchildren. And I have to think about them. We live in a very drive-through Christianity where we want it now, we want everything now, and I want to spend it all on myself in my generation, rather than saying, I want to lay up for my children. I want to lay up for my grandchildren. I want to lay some groundwork that they can build upon.
Yep.
And so, of course, that approach is even how I approach things strategically. Is I might say, hey, I'm going to lay some groundwork here, politically or policy-wise, that others can build on, right? Type of thing. So, also not removing urgency, but also recognizing I may not get everything done in my day that needs to be done in our nation to correct its course, because we all know that our nation is under God's judgment and is being destroyed within and without, and for many reasons. And I would say one of the major reasons that we see in Scripture is that when a nation gives itself over to child sacrifice, especially, and turns a blind eye to it, that God gives them over to His judgment. And until you fix that, you won't fix your problems. We have even God would bring a nation against Israel, whether it's the Assyrians or others, and they would protect their borders. They would do everything to protect their borders. But the prophets would say, fix the oppression in your streets. Right. Mm-hmm. Stop the bloodshed. Stop the child sacrifice. But they would that was secondary. They didn't worry about that. They focused on, we got to secure our borders. And if we do that same thing today, if we say our borders are more important to secure our borders than to secure the right to life of our preborn neighbors, what makes us think that God is not going to continue to hand us over to His judgment? So I'm not saying we shouldn't pursue these things. I'm saying you don't pursue this to the detriment of pursuing this.
Sure.
And that's what I see is, hey, this is a secondary issue. We got to focus on this. And I'm saying these things are happening because you are neglecting this.
Yeah.
And so until we correct oppression, until we love our preborn neighbors ourselves, we're really not loving anyone. Because we're actually handing ourselves over to God's judgment.
Yeah.
When we see rampant homosexuality, transgenderism, these are symptoms. These are symptoms. They're not root causes.
So it's very. I think I'm gathering at least that the pro-life issue is the issue at hand that you are the most fired up about. The biggest thing that you're talking about is the right to life and loving our unborn neighbors as ourselves. So can you walk our audience through where the state of Idaho is currently with their abortion laws? What is your goal maybe in this next legislative session, and then maybe like a broader scope 5-year look as to where you would like us to be as a state?
Yeah. So one of the main issues that I see as a state is that what we've done in the modern pro-life movement, there have been many, many well-meaning people that have been a part of that. A lot of godly Christians. I think many of them have been misled. So the current state where we're at is I can kind of sum it up in just saying that we have, by our actions, the state of Idaho has claimed that the legislature has the moral and constitutional authority to decide and to essentially to decide and to I guess take to itself the authority that it can determine who has a right to life and who doesn't. We have the authority over life and death as the legislature. We have no constitutional or God-given authority of that. So if we think about our laws surrounding game animals, elk, let's say, it was just October, and during the month of October, you can go kill an elk. The state of Idaho is declaring with the laws that by declaring during the month of October, you can kill an elk, but in January you may not. What they're saying is they have authority over the life or death of that animal, okay? By saying the when, where, how, and why you can kill an elk. When we do that with our preborn neighbor, when we say that you may not kill them, you may not murder them here, but you may murder them here, or under these circumstances, when we regulate the when, why, how, and what we can murder our preborn neighbors, what we're actually claiming, it's very fundamental here, we're claiming that the legislature has the authority to give life and take it away. It has the power of life and death. And now I would argue that it has no constitutional authority to do this, nor any authority delegated by God. Because the state of Idaho has no other authority than what has been delegated by God through the Constitution, by the consent of the people. That is the only authority the state legislature in Idaho has to create laws or to repeal laws. That's all the authority we have. But what we've done in our pro-life laws, whether it's the Defense of Life Act, or it's the heartbeat, I don't remember what it was called, but it was a heartbeat bill when it was passed. But we had some trigger bills when Roe versus Wade was overturned. They went into effect. What these laws do is they set up differing penalties for the murder of a preborn child than what is if someone were to murder you or myself. So we treat that differently. We have unequal weights and measures. We show partiality against someone who was conceived in a different circumstance, the circumstance of rape or incest. We say, well, in those circumstances, we as the legislature of Idaho recognize no right to life. But in these other circumstances, we recognize a right to life, and we're going to protect it. And so we have not protected all life equally. And so just from a moral perspective, that there's only one moral justification. There's only one justification for having a law against murder, and it's that we are created in the image of God. There's no other. We can justify a public game animal having some laws to restrict their killing over just your own sheep or cow that you own in your pasture. You can kill it at will. But the elk, you're limited because the state has deemed it prudent to preserve herd sizes and on all these things. For other reasons, they've determined this. But there's only one justification for saying you shall not murder a human being, and it's that we are created in the image of God. We are different. We're distinct creatures. So that is the moral foundation. But what we've done is we've denied that to our preborn neighbor, and by saying, okay, you get 30 years to life if you murder a born person, but if you murder, if a doctor murders a preborn child, you get 3 to 5 years and lose your license. Those are unequal weights and measures.
Right.
We don't apply that equally to all murders. And so to separate out, if we were to do that based on skin color, anybody of a darker shade of skin than this, the murderer gets 5 to 7 years, but anybody lighter than this gets 30 to 50 years. Like, how can we arbitrarily decide that as a legislature? What we're doing fundamentally is we're saying we have authority to do this. And I'm arguing we don't have any moral authority delegated by God, nor constitutional authority. So if we read the Idaho Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, it says that all laws are to be applied in our state equally. I swore to uphold the Constitution of the state of Idaho. That is the marching orders of the legislature. We are to do what it says, not go beyond that. That is our marching orders as a legislature to fulfill the duties that are given to us, delegated by the people, from the people through the Constitution to us as a legislature. We are told to apply all laws equally, but we do not. And so what I did in 2025 was I introduced a bill to essentially recognize the equal humanity of the preborn child and to have it treated equally under the law as anyone else. So right now, if you were to murder a pregnant woman, you would get charged with 2 counts of murder. Idaho Criminal Code recognizes the equal humanity of the preborn child in these cases, but it does not extend it if the mother decides to do it herself in certain circumstances. or if it's, and so forth. If a woman, if a baby was conceived in rape, and then that woman was murdered while pregnant, it would still be 2 counts of murder. So there's so much inconsistency here. And then the other thing is if a mother murders her 1-month-old child, she gets charged with murder, and she's tried by a jury of her peers. But if she were to murder that baby herself 1 month earlier, 1 day before birth, there would be zero penalty. Zero penalty. She is actually shielded by Idaho law. And so
some people would actually celebrate that.
Absolutely. And to deny a pregnant woman the equal treatment under the moral and legal order is to deny her moral agency, is to deny her humanity.
Yeah.
And so what we've done, we've set up all these precedents in law. We've codified it in law. And now what do we have to do? We say, well, we've moved forward. We've moved forward with our laws here in Idaho because the primary purpose of law is to save lives, right? That's been the premise. The pro-life movement, they wanted to save babies. Absolutely, amen. Let's save babies. But what they've done is they said we're going to use the law as a tool to accomplish those ends. And so whatever way that we can conceivably accomplish saving more babies, under the law, we'll do that. And so if you look at your principles, the Democrats use the principle of the ends justify the means. So if we can use the law to save school children by banning guns, if we can conceivably understand or argue that we can save children's lives by banning gun ownership, then let's do that. Whether it's long guns or magazine sizes, you can justify all that.
Sure.
Because the main purpose of law is to save lives. And that has really been the use of the law by the pro-life movement, rather than saying, what is the purpose of law? So as a lawmaker, my primary purpose is not to save babies at all costs. Should I tax you unjustly in order to redistribute that to maybe a nonprofit pregnancy center to give free ultrasounds? Or should that be through donation? Can I use the law illegitimately as long as I can say it's accomplishing a beautiful end type of thing? And so we have to get back to the proper use of the law in society. We have to get back to that and understand that what we codify in law, we are teaching society to think and to believe about our preborn neighbors in this case. And we're teaching them to believe that they're different. They're really no different than a game animal, that we can say the when, why, how, and what you may murder them. And so what we've done is we've denied the equal humanity of the preborn child. And they say, but we've moved forward. We've saved some babies. We may have saved some babies. Praise God, these babies have been saved. But just because God has brought perhaps a beautiful result from something that is outside of his design doesn't mean we should perpetuate that. If you think about if a young man got his girlfriend pregnant and he argues with his pastor and says, but pastor, look at my beautiful baby that was a result of this. Doesn't that justify that? Yes, praise God for that beautiful life, but don't do that again.
Right.
You don't move forward in walking contrary to God's revealed plain will just because there was a result that was beautiful. God can bring beauty out of ashes all the time, and he can bring good out of bad. God is able to do that, and he does it all the time. So we don't just
It'd be best for us to just not burn the building down, and hope that God has to reconstitute another building from ashes every time.
Yeah,
right.
Right, exactly. So I guess what I'm saying is we could look back all day and argue about whether or not our pro-life laws have saved lives or not. But that is not, in my opinion, the primary conversation we should be having.
Right.
It's what should we do now? We need to understand what our duty is as a legislature, because as a lawmaker, I don't enforce laws.
Right.
I can pass a law, but if it's not enforced, it has no effect. So all I can do is pass a law that is moral, and it's within the proper sphere of which God ordained it, and within the sphere of the Constitution which I swore to uphold. So those are the criteria when I look at how do I develop policy. And so I have been very vocal about I reject the pro-life laws that are put in front of me. I debate against them. I vote against them. And people say, well, come on, they're making some progress. And I'll give you an example. This past session, I helped kill a bill in committee, and some might have been disparaged by that. I don't know. But it did two things. The first thing it did was it in Idaho, it's once a police report has been submitted for a woman who has been raped, I guess backing up a little bit, we have what we've created in Idaho law. It's a new code through this Defense of Life Act, and it's called criminal abortion. Criminal abortion has its definitions of what it is and what it isn't, and then it has its penalties that are associated with it, and they're different than the murder of a born person.
Was this passed, was the laws on the books for criminal abortion something that is recent post Roe v. Wade, or was this on the books before then?
It was a trigger law.
Okay.
So what it was is part of the law was once Roe versus Wade is overturned, if ever, it will take effect. And in fact, that was the part where a lot of people went ahead and supported it because they're like, it'll never be overturned. And so you're kind of you're able to navigate the whole pro-life thing,
right?
And without still
walking on eggshells,
not preventing people from doing whatever they want to do. So that's where that came from. And so the law itself, it established these different penalties under this idea of criminal abortion. Then it had these definitions of what isn't criminal abortion. And one of the definitions is if a woman has been raped and has filed a police report, then a doctor can murder that child, and it's not criminal abortion by definition. And what this bill did was it went in and it said, if you what we're going to do is we're going to make it more restrictive. So if you have filed a police report, then you have to take one more step before it's no longer criminal abortion. The state will provide 3 pamphlets. One pamphlet that will explain what you're doing to your child. It'll explain what your child actually is. And then it'll give you pregnancy resource centers. And it gives you 24 hours to think about this. And if you still want to go through it, so once you've completed your 24-hour process, then it's no longer criminal abortion. The purpose is we want to save more babies. Now, in Idaho, we actually haven't had any rape cases where babies have been aborted under this exception. So even to go after that to make it more restrictive feels a little more like theater than it does actually saving lives, if it's all about the practical side of everything. But what it did was all under the guise of we got to save some more lives by making it harder. But what you've done is when you said, once there's genuine premeditation, once you really know what you're doing to your child, you may murder it. If we applied that to any other situation, you're like, hey, I want to go murder my neighbor. Go have a coffee with him. I want you to look him in the eye. I want you to talk to his children. I want you to understand what you're doing. If you still want to go through with it, then once 24 hours over, you can go ahead and murder your neighbor. Absolutely not. That's absurd. Right. We don't apply these things to born individuals. What we've done is we've denied the humanity. Once you've denied the humanity, then you can do what you want with them. And so, of course, the left uses the word fetus, trying to once you dehumanize and deny that, you can kind of do what you want. But the problem is the right has done as well. We've perpetuated this. And so now all our laws look similar. And what it is I've argued we haven't moved the ball down the field. We've just moved it sideways on the field.
Right.
We haven't actually saved any I shouldn't say we haven't saved any babies, because God knows whether or not babies have been saved. There's indications that some babies have been saved. But at the end of the day, that's not. I shouldn't look at statistics whether or not I should be supporting future bills or not. I have to look at what are the principles by which I need to develop and support legislation. And so to me, the statistics are not as important when people say, well, we've saved thousands of babies, or we haven't saved any babies, whatever it might be. The statistics themselves indicate that we really haven't saved any babies. In fact, abortions are on the rise. They've just changed the mode of committing the murder. Instead of having it done through clinical abortions, as was the primary way, it's now gone to self-managed abortion, because it's totally legal in Idaho to order abortion pills and then to murder your own child. It's totally legal in Idaho, and there's nothing the state can or will do about it. And so we haven't really accomplished anything on this front besides, I think, maybe patting ourselves on the back that we've done something, but we really haven't. There may have been some babies saved, and praise God that there have. I think Health and Welfare have indicated that there's about for the adoptions of babies that are up for adoption prior to their birth, they've gone up about 4 or 5 a year. And they attribute that, they don't know for certain, but they attribute that to our abortion laws, that 4 or 5 mothers are now keeping them to term and giving them up for adoption. We don't know if there are others, of course. There might be 15, there might be 20. We don't know the answer to that. But when I approach these things, when we look at if the primary purpose is not for me as a legislator is not to save babies, it's to do justice. And in doing justice and having righteous laws, that will save babies. And so people say, well, we need to stop the flow of these abortion pills.
Right.
So the Democrats have tried this forever. Let's stop the flow of guns into the state in order to reduce murder. Right. As people say, guns don't kill people.
Right.
People kill people. Well, it's the same thing. If we go after the abortion pill, what we're doing is we're saying we're not going to criminalize the act. We're just going to try to restrict the murder weapon. That's all we're doing. So if we say we're going to legalize the murder of born people, but what we're going to do is we're going to ban all guns and knives and baseball bats. Like, how absurd would that be?
Right.
We're going to search everyone's cars. We're going to do all these things restrictively, but we're not just going to criminalize the act. It's absurd. I get objections. People say, well, if we pass this law, that's going to open up an investigation on every miscarriage. You're going to have to monitor women's menstrual cycles. Absolutely not. These are absurd notions. We don't do these things with our current murder statutes. Right. This isn't a regulation system, and we think in terms of statism and regulation. We have to, regulate everyone's movements to make sure you're not hurting your neighbor and so forth. We don't do that.
Right.
We don't do that. We just say, you shall not murder him. If you do, there are these penalties that are associated with it. But we're not going to watch every move to see if you're murdering him. You're innocent until proven guilty. There must be clear, articulable suspicion of foul play before there can be any investigation opened on a death. So we have people that die of natural causes every day across this country, most of which are never investigated because there was no indication there was foul play.
Right.
And it's the same thing. If we were to apply the laws that protect our lives to our preborn neighbors, the investigations would be the same. If there was clear, articulable evidence that there was foul play, then an investigation would be opened. There would have to be probable cause before an arrest made. There would be a jury of your peers. We wouldn't start monitoring everyone's actions. Life would be, in fact, we monitor already too much at this point. I would argue that we should monitor less.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it will not create this dystopian Big Brother state, as Nick Freitas has pointed out. I think in an interview with Pastor Wilson, he said, "Well, he is not excited about these laws because it'll create this, essentially this Big Brother state where you're investigating all these miscarriages." And that's bogus.
Right.
That's not what's going to happen.
And think about what was on the books before abortion was legalized, right? Like, it was illegal to have an abortion, and there wasn't these massive invasions of privacy and or show trials in order to try to criminalize women. From a father who's experienced several miscarriages, there's nothing worse in that moment. I think that it's very obvious from what you've said. People die of natural causes all of the time. It's not like the government is going to be looking to deploy more resources into that. But I am curious, from your perspective, where do you see the biggest hang-up right now? Is that with moderate conservatives or liberals at this point in trying to push these, equal right to life bills?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess the liberals, they're going to oppose any type of restriction of any sort on abortion. So the liberals pretty much would support abortion on demand, meaning that you can, as long as the child hasn't breathed, you can murder it. Now, I have had conversations that with some of my colleagues in the Senate that are Democrats. And their position is that once a choice has been made, so basically the moral authority or the moral high ground. I don't remember. I don't know what to say. How to say it. The moral, the superior moral deciding factor is choice. And so once a mother has made their choice to keep the baby, then to murder it would be murder. And so in their mind, it's really quite bizarre. But how a baby, essentially a human being, has their right, an unalienable right, is through the cognitive choice of its mother. So once the mother has decided to keep it, then she must not murder it, or else then it's murder. And it's quite a bizarre idea that's like a moral foundation. It's choice.
Seems like a lot of gymnastics.
It is, because we were actually having a conversation with a pregnant colleague of mine and this little baby boy, and and he's got a name. Of course, he's still a fetus, but et cetera. But it was like, would it be wrong to murder him? Well, absolutely, because I chose to keep him. And once I've chosen to keep him, it gives him that right to life. And taking it away would be morally wrong.
Mm-hmm. But that's putting the woman in the place of God to determine,
Amen.
That I am choosing this kid to live, so therefore, I'm the arbiter of life.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so that's where my Democratic colleagues are coming from. Mm-hmm. So they're going to oppose really any restriction on access to abortion, essentially. But really, the main opposition that I have faced and will continue to face are people that would say they're pro-life, and so they say, hey, we support life, we believe in the right to life, limited, but they would say they believe in the right to life. Some of them are saying, hey, I won't support this because it just goes too far, or it's just not the right time. We're not ready for this. Some have gone so far as to say, I'd like to see this in the future, but the church isn't ready to take care of all the influx of babies that are going to be just showing up now that we're going to have to take care of and do something with.
Because God's not big enough to handle that, right?
Correct. So, I know genocide is happening in the next country, but until we're set up to take the overflow of these refugees, we're actually okay with that genocide happening because we're just not set up to take care of that. Well, no, we have to care right now if genocide is happening. So I hear all kinds of arguments. I did get 17 bill sponsors on my legislation last year, which was huge. And I do think there are a number of others that would potentially sign on if the bill had a clear path forward. Right now, there's just not a lot of heart in the legislature to pass this. And I've been told by very, very smart men in government, whether in the legislature or even executive branch officials, that I have the moral high ground, that they recognize the constitutionality of my bill, that our bills are actually, that we have in Idaho, our laws are actually unconstitutional because they do not apply the law equally to all. And in that, what we're saying is we have to deny that they are human, because it says that every person is to be given the equal treatment under the law. And so what we do is we deny their personhood. When we don't do that, you automatically deny their personhood by not giving them equal treatment according to the definition of the Constitution. And so it's not a lack of constitutionality. It's not a lack of moral foundation. It's just a lack of, there's not a lot of heart for it. It's not a primary issue. I've been told that it's like, well, it's an important issue, but it's not the primary issue. Immigration is the primary issue, or whatever it is. And in my opinion, we should. Jesus says that the Pharisees would do all these things, and they would do them so diligently, but they would neglect mercy. They would neglect justice.
Yeah.
And he says, these things you should have done without neglecting the other. So I'm not advocating for us to stop caring about other areas. And I do care about other areas. I could get into about a dozen bills that I'm working on right now, trying to figure out which ones I'm actually going to run, because not everybody can run a dozen bills every session. That's just too much. But I'm working on bills from building inspectors to liquor licensing issues, Medicaid, MCO, and various things. I've got a large list that we're working on. A lot of issues that some of them will have a really good shot at making through. Some issues dealing with foster care visitations.
Yeah.
These are very practical that are going to affect people's lives, and they're important. Some are bills that my constituents have brought to me and said, "Hey, this has been a problem. What can we do to tweak the law and to make this easier?" Whether it's in public school, parents have to go pay for a doctor's note in order to get their child excused from school. Well, can we fix that? Type of thing. And so we're working on multiple pieces of legislation. Not all of it will see the light of day. Not all of it will get through, but I think some of it will make it through. And I'm a very practical guy. As far as I want to do what we can do today on various issues. But when it comes to this issue of life, I have to be a voice for the voiceless.
Yeah.
I have preborn neighbors that are orphaned, and I have to speak up for them.
Mm-hmm.
Who else will? I have to speak up for them, and I have to stand for them. So to me, that's an important issue. People say, "Well, can't we do this incrementally?" Absolutely, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. I introduced it last year. I got some bill sponsors. Right. I want to introduce it again. I want to get bill sponsors. I want to get more bill sponsors. But how do you, if you're a liar and you want to become a truth teller, what's the first step? Tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You tell the truth.
Yeah.
That's the first step. If you have an unjust laws, what's the first step in getting just laws? Is you do justice.
Mm-hmm.
You tell the truth. You build a habit of telling the truth. You form habits of telling truth, right? To become more and more honest. But you don't tell the truth, become an honest person by telling the truth 6 days a week, and then allowing yourself to lie on Sundays.
Right.
A man doesn't become less of an adulterer by saying, I'm not going to go out every night. I'm just going to go out on Saturday nights. Mm-hmm. Like, that would be unacceptable. And so to me, the path forward is justice for the preborn, and only justice, no half measures. And I think until we all stand up for this, we'll never get there. Water always flows downhill. Mm-hmm. If there's an easier route, we will always take an easier route.
Right.
Electricity does this. Water does this. Everything does this. It's the natural course of things. Mm-hmm. So if I can vote for this easier piece of legislation that I can feel like I've gotten something done, why would I ever vote for the harder one? Right. Why would I ever pursue it and advocate for it? I'm actually kicking the stool out from underneath myself. Mm-hmm. If I say, I'm advocating for this bill that is built on this moral foundation of equal protection, acknowledging the equal personhood and humanity of the preborn child. And then I say, but I'm going to go ahead and support this legislation that denies that. Mm. I've completely reversed all my work.
Sure.
And I can't be the hypocrite.
I think one of the things that everything that you're saying reveals an unbelief that we have in the goodness of God's law, right? Like we don't really trust that when we apply God's law, that it really will be good. And so then we think of ourselves as being more just than God, right? And we think like, well, if we treated it this way on principle, that's not really gonna, it's like, no, God's given us a perfect law. He's given us a standard. And if we follow that standard, what we're going to see is true justice. We are not more just than God, and I think that we need to establish that. And I think people kind of they get shy about it, in that sense. And I think it actually kind of shows you again just downstream of what happens when we abandon true religion. Yeah. What happens when, and I even mean like from Christians who like they might have a general tether around what's right, but they still kind of play this game where law and politics is separate from Christianity, from faith, from true religion, and that's when everything goes awry. Senator, I'm wondering, just as a legislator in your position, what are some of the frequent temptations that would be prevalent for someone in your position? Like, where do the compromises come from in the most insidious fashion? I would imagine that many people who especially coming in as conservatives. I don't trust the Democrats. They generally have good intentions as they're getting into politics. But what are the kind of things that they need to be watching out for in order to not fall into the snare of unprincipled thoughts about law and politics as a whole?
I think self-preservation is the principle by which all compromise is built on. Self-preservation, prestige is another one. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic.
Right.
So if I am elected to uphold the principles of our Constitution as a legislator, I'm elected by my constituents to do this. If I am convinced that I need to uphold and secure rights, as I said. Now, I would say I'm in a very pro-life district, and many of my constituents agree with me on this and applaud my efforts and appreciate my efforts. But if I were to take simply the pressure of re-election and say, well, I'm going to take a step back and I'm not going to pursue what is true and clear in the Constitution and in our moral foundations, because of that pressure, that I actually am unfit to serve, in my opinion. And I'm not doing service to the people, because the passions of the people are driven by media and all these things, and that's why we have a constitutional republic. That's why I want to live in a constitutional republic and not a direct democracy. A democracy is mob rule. It's whatever the opinion of the day is, it rules. And so I hear a lot of cries even to strip away from, honestly, it happens on both sides, to strip away our constitutional protected rights because of a greater good and so forth. So the first one is, I think, the pressure of re-election. So you're going to say, yes, I know this is right, but I'm going to do this, whether it's a half measure, I'm going to do this over here that I actually fundamentally disagree with, because I just have to, follow what the crowd is saying. Pilate did that. Shall I crucify your king? Yes. Give him over to be crucified. Pilate didn't want to.
Right.
It actually went against his good moral sense. He was terrified to do what he did, but he did it because of the pressure of the crowd. And so I'm not saying ignore the people. I am a people person. I am in customer service. I spend day in and day out with my constituents, hearing their concerns. I don't always agree with them, but I hear their concerns. Often I will agree with them, and maybe we need to do this or that or the other about it. But it might be that here's the concern, but instead of doing this with the law, maybe we should think about there isn't any law solution here. But maybe I can advocate for you as just a political voice, or maybe there is a solution, but it's over here. I'll get requests from elderly constituents saying, "Hey, we need rent caps. We need rent caps in Idaho because they keep raising our rent." That's actually unjust. That actually violates the justice of God to place these rent caps. And then there are also other unintended consequences, such as nobody wants to invest in Idaho anymore. Right. Nobody wants to invest in the apartment building that you're living in because they cannot charge what it's costing them to operate this, whatever it might be. So you have all these ramifications for that. It's my job to look at what are the unintended consequences. What are they? And then try to help explain and help my constituent to understand. Yes, I absolutely hear you, and I sympathize with you on this. But if we were to do this, number one, I believe it's immoral if we do this because of X, Y, and Z. And then number two, here are some unintended consequences. Right. And often we want to
fix the situation.
It's not going to fix it. It might fix it for a time, but it's going to make matters worse in the long run. And it's like when you're really, really thirsty and all you have available in the moment is antifreeze to drink. Don't drink it.
Right.
And you have to walk by faith. You have to understand that's going to kill me. It's going to quench my thirst in the moment, but it's going to kill me. So I'm going to refrain. and I'm going to feel thirsty a little longer, right? But I'm going to look for water that'll quench my thirst, and not just immediately
finding an actual solution to the
100%.
issue. And that's fascinating, because right now, I mean, I would say in Latah County, the affordability is the biggest issue here. There's an influx of young families that are moving here, and I would generally tend to think that there are too many laws on the books. We need to deregulate some building codes, and also just the cost of supplies has gone through the roof since COVID. Hasn't come down, and so as a legislator, when you hear that the cost of living is outrageous, it's a moral obligation that you're taking upon yourself to say, now it is my job to figure out how to make this situation, according to the way God would have it, a better place for my people.
It may be my job.
Yeah.
There are certain things that the state should stay out of. Right. The state shouldn't get involved in every issue that's happening. So it needs to set up certain checks and balances, certain standards by which everything is dealt with. Fraud is wrong and should be punished by the state. But if you make a foolish move and you sell your house for too cheap, and now you need to buy where it's more expensive, that's not the state's responsibility.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so on some of these levels, it's not the state's responsibility to bail you out of
your own financial.
You might have made bad decisions, run of bad luck, as a lot of people want to call it and think of it as. Whatever it might be, the state isn't there to always bail you out or fix your problems. Now, we may have massive corporations that are being shielded by special tax laws or various other things that are creating unfair advantages. Then that needs to be dealt with. Let's not give these massive corporations unfair advantages over the small builders or investors or just homeowners in general. So there are things we can look at, definitely. But it isn't to start getting in and manipulating prices and all these things that actually creates more problems. It's drinking the antifreeze.
Right.
And you're going to poison that. It disincentivizes investment and in the property and all these things. So getting back to your question, I would say, so the first one is just facing the pressures and not having a backbone to say, I 100% hear you, but here's why that's not a solution. And so you start to compromise, and it just becomes, you just have your finger in the wind, whatever the movement is of the day, you're just following it to get along. There was, I don't remember who it was, said that a leader will lead people often where they want to go, and a great leader will lead people where they need to go, type of thing. And so it is my job to do research, to think about unintended consequences, and try to communicate that best possible, and to listen to them. I might not always be right. There might be times where a constituent comes and says, actually, you're wrong because of X, Y, and Z, and I didn't think that through, or whatever it might be. There have been times where I've been corrected by my constituents, and I'm like, hey, in the future, I will not vote this way. I was not aware of X, Y, and Z. And that has happened in my first legislative session. That'll happen again. I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to humble myself before my constituents or anybody else that approaches me and says, hey, you were wrong in this. I have to be willing to do that because I don't always have it right every time. Your question, what can be some of those things that'll help us or make us compromise? The other one, I think, is prestige, name recognition, wanting to be accepted by the media or the political elites. There is, like in high school, right? There's the in crowd, there's the cool crowd, and you want to belong, right? There's the temptation to belong. There's a lot of prestige. You get maybe an opportunity to speak or to sit at the right table, and all those things are real. And well, if you become one of those, nerdy or whacked guys out on the fringe, you're not going to get invited to all the functions. You're not going to be seen as one of the cool kids, essentially. So there is the pressure there as well. To me, there hasn't been really any pressure. I'm not part of the political in crowd. I didn't grow up with that. My family weren't large landholders. So I won't say that the temptation is not there to want to be accepted, but it's definitely not been maybe as strong for me as maybe other people. And I don't know if it's just because of my background or whatever it is. But that's another one that's real. That's another one that's real, and it plays on your pride, your self-importance, and it's easy to become self-important and to think that you're something above others, and you're not above anything. In fact, to go up is the way down. Right? It's that paradox. Christ taught was that the way up is the way down. You want to become great? Serve more people. Right. And so I view the office of the Senate not as a higher place. People say, "Oh, you a big old politician." No, not in that sense. Yes, I represent 60,000 people, but that doesn't make me higher up than anyone. Mm-hmm. That makes me essentially lower because I'm serving more people. Right. Mm-hmm. I'm serving 60,000 people every day as a senator, plus serving people in my business and whatever it might be. I'm not above them. Mm-hmm. I'm equal in my citizenship. And then I serve them. I've placed myself under them. Mm. And to do this, that doesn't mean that I don't have certain privileges as a senator, of course, to vote and to enact policy and so forth. But I'm doing it on their behalf. Right. This isn't I'm nothing special over anyone else. I'm just equal in my humanity, equal in my citizenship. I have, in the providence of God, been chosen to serve in this capacity for a time. Mm-hmm. Mm. And if He wills, I'll serve another 2 years and see where we go from there.
Yeah. Do you have any aspirations or desire at all to take it to the next level in DC?
And it's interesting when you think of even next level. It is a different level. Yeah. But I don't know that I would say next level. This federal government is to serve the state. Mm-hmm. So essentially, it's taking the next level down. Mm-hmm. If I were going to categorize it, I really don't want to leave Idaho. Mm-hmm. I really don't want to leave Idaho. I want to be with my wife and kids every day. That's where I've approached it. Now, I try to leave room for what God moves and provides opportunities. I'm not saying it's an impossibility, but I would want it to be really clear that I needed to go to DC. Yeah. I would rather stay in Idaho. I'll just say that my own personal preference. Sure. I don't have any ambitions to run for Congress or to run for U.S. Senate. I don't have any ambitions to run for executive branch offices. Whether governor, lieutenant governor, I get those questions a lot. Are you going to run for governor? I don't know. Mm-hmm. If the Lord wills, sure, I might, but probably not for 25 years. Yeah. I'll think about that in 25 years when my kids are grown and But anyway, that's where I'm at today. I want to serve where I'm at, be the best senator I can be. And raise my children, serve in my church, love my wife, run my business, pay my bills. Right.
Sounds like a good old American right there. Yeah. It's been a pleasure having you on. Yeah. Appreciate you taking the time and coming up to Moscow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything that we can leave our viewers with that they could be praying for you?
I would say that the spiritual realm is real, and spiritual opposition is real. And everything is spiritual. There's nothing that we do, whether in our lives at home or in our business or in politics, that isn't affected spiritually. I know that a lot of the issues that I care about, and everything, has a spiritual connotation to it. There's a moral aspect to everything, but especially the issues that I, at this point, tend to deal with. There tends to be I think a large spiritual opposition to, especially the issue of life. Abortion is the devil's sacrament. There are other things that we're working on where we're looking at fixing some of our pornography laws in the state of Idaho, which is going to face a lot of spiritual opposition. So I would say, pray for me for moral courage, for humility, enough to listen to my constituents, to always be willing to serve them, through the Constitution and through God's moral foundation. And pray for my marriage. My wife and I have been married for going on 18 years, but We know that the devil wants to destroy marriage. He wants to destroy family. So pray for my marriage, that I would always remain faithful to my wife, that I would always, more than just physically, but also emotionally, and to be the husband that she needs, and then to also be the father that my children need, that I would raise my children in the Lord, and that I wouldn't neglect them for for politics and policy making. Pray for my business as well. Obviously, I need the Lord's providence in providing work and His sustaining grace in that. And then pray for success in the legislation that we're wanting, and because we know we need to change hearts and minds, especially on the abortion issue. This is not something that's going to happen overnight, humanly speaking, and so we need hearts and minds to be changed, and the Lord is able to do that. So if we stay faithful to the truth, and reasonable in our conduct and godly in our conduct, and then leave the results to the Lord, but be praying for those results as well.
Fantastic.
Definitely would appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Senator Shippy. It's been a privilege. It's been an honor. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and just to hear your very clear articulations of the truth, to hear you articulating how important your Christian faith is in everything that you do is also really powerful. To hear you speak about the importance of character is also just really inspiring. And I hope you know that we have your back. We will be praying for you, and just really grateful for you. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks guys. Appreciate it.